Hello, I'm Russ Kane, and this is a special additional show to the ones that we stream on the Midday Show series. Last time we discussed Bob Dylan. Well, I listened and Patrick discussed. Yes, we are back with my pal, and we've been pals since we were at school, aged 14. So that's, as you can see, nearly 10 years. Moving on, Patrick Humphries, author, raconteur, jolly good egg, and my pal. And you got a different subject for us this week.
The Who.
I
Up
thought you
there
got to
with
sleep. I thought you'd gone to sleep there. I
no,
thought it
no,
was
no, no, no.
narcolepsy for a sec.
It's called the build-up, love.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay.
The Who. I think we're agreed that they're certainly in the top five British bands, and they've been in the news recently. There's always been tension in the band. Now there's only two of them. There's only Townsend and Daltrey. There still seems to be tension about whether
It's
they're
unbelievable.
I know it's. You'd think that they got over it by now. There's always an issue. I mean, poor old Zach Starkey. I mean, he was booted out, then he came back, then he's booted out again.
But he has been. Just to clarify, all right. Let's just run through that for those who don't know. But if you're a big Who fan, you will, right? So remind us, how many years has Ringo's son Zach Starkey been drumming for the Who?
I mean, it must be for certainly 15 years. I mean, he was the Who's drummer.
Right.
And then
so he replaced Kenny. And how long was Kenny Jones drumming?
Well, he was with them for about 4 or 5 years. I mean, Keith Moon left some big shoes to fill.
You can't. You can't.
No, it is impossible. I mean, unfortunately, the only time I ever saw the Who live was with Kenny Jones, but it was the first gig since they'd replaced Keith, and it was at the Rainbow, and the vibe, as you can imagine, was extraordinary. And Loud. I'm sorry, was it Loud?
I can't believe I've seen the Who in the full before 50% of them died. I was lucky enough I've seen them several times. And apart from Hendrix, the loudest gig I've ever been to in my life. I mean, like, you came out and you were trying to talk to your pal, you couldn't hear a thing.
You couldn't hear a thing.
Your hearing had actually gone.
Yeah.
And secondly, Keith Moon was just incredible, irreplaceable, and incredible.
Yes. I mean, it was an extraordinary. It's an extraordinary band for a number of reasons. I mean, as I say, there was always this conflict. And one of the best books about the Who by Mark Blake, is an excellent writer, and it's the Who in the '60s, and the subtitle is "Pretend You're in a War." And I think that's it. I mean, there was this constant tension between. I mean, Pete Townsend, bless him, art college product, art student, highfalutin ideas. Roger Daltrey, salt of the earth, man of the people. John Entwistle, solid bass player. Keith Moon, complete maniac. And you put the four of them together, and there's bound to be sparks. Of course, it fell on Townsend's shoulders as the principal songwriter, and he's a fascinating character. I mean, he seems very troubled. His autobiography is actually quite I won't say sad read, but it's very honest. But it doesn't seem like a very happy life.
He's not. He never comes across as a happy fella. No. I've always thought. I know this sounds ridiculous, but I'm just wearing my punter's hat as opposed to you wearing your expert hat. Is this, you want to go up to him and say, mate, you're one of the most famous people on the planet. Out of the billions of kids who picked up a guitar, you've become a rock god. You've made a fortune. You're loved by millions. Just enjoy it occasionally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be a bit more Rod Stewart, who just loves what's happening.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think there is always a problem with bands. Maybe it's just a British thing that there's usually just the one songwriter. I mean, we go back to the Beatles inevitably because they had two, and then Jules began. But basically, you think of the Kinks and the Who. The Stones, I suppose, had Mick and Keith, but it's usually one principal songwriter, and it all devolves on them. And of course, back in the '60s, it was well, it's all very well, you want a bit of time to write, but I mean, the record company needs a new single by Friday, and you're a bit slow on that second album, I mean, clip round the ear and get on with it, And of course, again, as we keep saying, what is extraordinary about the Who and so many of those bands from the 60s is not just the quantity of the material they produce, but the quality.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah. Totally.
I mean, even casual listeners could probably name 3 or 4 Who songs off the top of their head. You know,
Yeah.
it's incredible, just incredible.
I always loved seeing them, but I've always thought, and I've thought about this a lot, God knows why, but Keith Moon, the perfect drummer for the Who, would be the worst choice drummer for any other band that I could think
absolutely.
of. The only band I thought he might work in, and it's not one of my favorite bands at all, in my own opinion. I think they're hugely overrated. That's just me. Would be the Red Hot Chili Peppers or someone like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you imagine Keith Moon with the Stones, diabolical.
No,
Beatles, terrible. I can't think of any other band he could have played in.
But he might have got away with it in Led Zeppelin, because John Bonham was a powerhouse drummer. But Moon was one of the.
The difference is though that Bonham, for all the flair and everything, was an amazing drummer whose legacy is still being studied. And still being imitated and copied, and I go on a lot of drum channels, and they will always, like you all referred to the Beatles or Dylan, they will always, doesn't matter who's playing, refer to John Bonham. Yes. No one refers to, and his particular stars and his triplets and everything. No one can ever say that about Keith. No one knew what the hell he was playing.
No. I mean, I think with Keith, the legend also overtook. I mean, you think of Keith Moon and it's, driving Cadillacs into swimming pools and blowing up hotel rooms and this extraordinary manic self-destructive streak that was in him. I mean, it was.
He was very young. We always forget how young he was.
Yeah. He began playing, I think, in the Sea Cadets,
yes,
as a teenager, and yes, he was 31 when he died. I mean,
nothing.
Right, he crammed a lot in there, but it was a terrible waste because I think and the last few years he did look terrible. He just was.
He looked shocking.
Yes.
It was an absolute. There's so many Keith Moon stories. I mean, the one that springs to mind. He's dressed like a tramp, literally, and he walks into Jack Barclay's in Berkeley Square, which is a Rolls-Royce dealership, like the creme de la creme, and they kind of throw him out. So he comes back. He says, I'm going to buy it. And he just brings out the cash from his pockets and buys a Rolls-Royce on a whim.
Yes. I mean, classic. I mean, the story. I mean, Tony Fletcher's Keith Moon biography. I think it's Music Cell's best ever selling title, and they've been talking about a Moon biopic for years. I mean, that really would be something, that really would be something. But I mean, again, it's the band and the four of them that work together. I mean, Moon was almost played the drums like a lead instrument,
Correct.
I mean, yes, and it just came across. And it's interesting when I knew we were going to talk about it, I was researching, and of course the thing. The culture that they came from, of course, is the mods. That was the big thing in the 60s. It was mods versus rockers, and mods are the ones that everyone like. I've got a bit of a soft spot for the rockers, actually. The Ace Cafe, those big motorcycles, their fondness for 50s rock and roll. I think they're a youth tribe waiting to be explored.
There's your next book.
I'd love to. I'd love to. I think it's fantastic. I mean, one of my dear friends, Chris Royce, late Chris Royce, he said there was a Buddy Holly lives on the railway wall in Orpington for years after Buddy died, and all these old rockers they loved them. But the mods were the ones, of course, that they do write the books about and they make films about, and a lot of that, of course, was the Who. And it was very interesting that they had two managers. One was Chris Stamp, who was the brother of Terence Stamp.
Yep.
The other was Kit Lambert, who was the son of a very eminent classical composer and musician. And it was quite a calculated thing when beat groups began to be popular in 1964. Lambert went out. He thought they needed a London equivalent of the Beatles, and so he just went round in his big car to the clubs and the pubs, and anywhere there were the Vespa scooters parked outside, he went in because that's where the mods congregated.
Look for the Parkers hanging up on the wall.
Yes, and all those mirrors coming off the scooters, and he chanced upon the Who, so it was quite a calculated thing. But of course, what they got was this incredible band with this incredible songwriter. I mean, Townsend. I think he's a bit underappreciated in many ways as a songwriter, because as we were saying earlier, I mean, we all know Who songs; they're in our DNA. But he's never quite taken seriously, if you like, along with.
Oh, really?
I don't know. His name doesn't crop up as often as you might expect.
Well, yeah, I remember going to the Royal Albert Hall in London. If you're watching this around the world, it's the magnificent place, Victorian edifice called the Royal Albert Hall, and seeing the whole of Tommy performed with the full band was still alive, and loads of guest stars coming on to do it as well. And Keith was Uncle. Oh, help me out! The horrible, I'm your wicked Uncle Ernie.
Oh,
Uncle
yes,
Ernie
yes,
and everything like that.
Yeah.
I don't think you could get anything kind of bigger and more serious.
No.
And I'm trying. You're going to get cross with me, but I have known you since we were 14, so stand by. Some of those tunes are fantastic, but I just always got the feeling with Tommy that it was like veering towards being pretentious.
Yeah.
I really always felt that. I always thought there was a streak. Help me out with this. This is maybe this is the Pete Townsend conundrum. Whereas some people, I'll quote again Rod Stewart, Elton, you can choose any of them, are really happy with their Paul McCartney, happy with their role. Somehow, maybe Pete Townsend just thought, I've got to be like really serious. I've got to be the Mozart, the Beethoven, the Brahms of my day. And I don't know.
I don't think it's worn well. I think you're absolutely right. It's not often said. I think you're absolutely right. I think that they back at the time there's the Beatles, the Stones, the Kinks, the Who. I mean, they were probably the
fabulous.
I mean, they were.
Can I just say, and I've never discussed this with you, I think the most underrated band from that period, the Small Faces. Just underrated.
Yes, okay. And not to me. I thought Steve Marriott was a great singer and there's some great singers, but I'm not. No, I put the Kinks as the most underrated, but that's for another time.
Really?
Yeah. I think the Kinks have never really, particularly their 60s stuff. But back to my original point.
Sorry.
I think I think in the pantheon, I think we'd agree that the Who would be there. But I mean, the Beatles and the Stones were coming out with these fantastic records, and the Who never really on album never really got it together to a certain extent. And I think Tommy was Pete's statement. It was the first rock opera, and I think that sort of hoists its own petard. I think that was when the levels of pretentiousness came in, and I absolutely agree with you. I mean, it was a double album. It was a hard slog. The one everyone remembers is Pinball Wizard.
Sure. What a
which was only put on at the very last minute because the music critic of the Observer, when this is, the national newspaper didn't write about pop music much in those days, but Nick Cohn did, and he was a huge pinball fan. So Townsend thought, well, if I put a song about pinball in there, it should get a good review in the Observer.
No, are you serious?
Yeah. That's why Pinball Wizard ended up on Tommy, arguably the best track. But I think, isn't it great the way these things work?
Hilarious. And if you want to know about rock and roll, just follow the money.
Yeah.
There you go. The end.
And I think that Tommy, I mean, it does have its moments, and they toured it around opera houses around the world, and I think it's not so much that it was a bad album, but I think after Tommy, every band with pretension, hey man, we better do our own rock opera, because that's led.
What was that dreadful theme they came up with? I don't mean musicals. There was that term. It's a concept. It's another word. It's like the concept album, or it's a
yes.
You go,
concept,
you feel your heart full. Just play some great tunes.
Whole tracks that took up one side of an album. No,
I've got things to do, and I've got to go to the loo. Could you just cut the tracks up a little bit?
You were talking about the volume, and talking to Chris Welsh from the Melody Maker. He was there when the Who premiered Tommy. Now they premiered it at Ronnie Scott's club in
Good
Soho,
God.
and you know Ronnie's. It's a
It's
beautiful,
tiny.
intimate, but tiny.
Tiny.
But apparently, I've seen pictures of it. It looked like they were using the same PA as they would have done for the Albert Hall.
Oh my
So
God.
I mean, it must have been like a physical, force.
That must have. Well, the one thing about the Who, and again, I got to say with Hendrix as well, you did feel. I know this sounds ludicrous, but I can remember it like it was yesterday. Apart from coming out really deaf, deaf. Is you felt your insides shaking about like crazy. I mean, really, those notes went. All your whole body was vibrating internally.
Yes.
And I think with Taylor Swift.
Yes. That Mumford and Sons. No, I think I don't know whether it's ever been overtaken, but at one point, I think the Guinness Book of Records had the Who as the loudest ever band. They played Charlton in 1976, an outdoor thing, 126 decibels. Now I don't know how loud, but I think it's it's like standing on the runway at Heathrow. I mean, it was incredibly loud. That was all. I don't
think that the folks, unless you went to a Who concert, folks watching this chat have any concept. Seriously, you think, oh, well, like I went to see, I don't know, AC/DC, they were loud. I haven't seen them, but I'm using that as an example. Rank amateur, I love AC/DC, by the way, but rank amateurs when it comes to loud.
Yes.
Why did they have to play so loud?
Well, I think it was the power of the music. I mean, if you think of Townsend and those power chords, the windmill thing, it was a visual spectacle, coming down that. And I think it's almost like you could imagine the volume when you saw him doing it. And then you had this incredible, and of course you had Moon at the back, by all accounts the world's biggest drum kit. I mean, he was going all over the place. I think they saw the volume as almost like a weapon, And I think that when they did Tommy, they felt they were getting away from being a rock and roll band. And interesting enough, the follow up, of course, was Live at Leeds, which is one of the all time great.
I got that album tucked away in my storage. Live at Leeds, it was fabulous.
Oh, it's fantastic. One of the all time great live albums. Then Pete felt that he needed to try and top Tommy, and there was this project called Lifehouse, which was I don't think anybody's ever understood it. Certainly not Pete Townsend. Certainly not the Punters. It was rock and roll was going to save the world. The Who were it wasn't like a sort of film or anything, but they were going to play dates, and there'd be some connection with the audience. Maybe it was a precursor of iPhones or something, but it was all this completely garbled, frankly bollocks by the sound of it. But from that, what was salvaged was probably the best ever Who album, which is Who's Next.
Love that album. I've got all their albums. I mean, I'll be honest, because I was so thrilled. I said, "Who do you want to chat about?" And they went, and you came back and you wrote to me, you said, "The Who," and I went, "Oh, fabulous! I'm in my wheelhouse now." Because I've been seeing them loads of times and got I couldn't wait for their albums. I loved Who's Next. I also adored the Who Sell Out, because if you compare rock, you kind of meant, how can I put this? I'm not phrasing it right, Patrick, which is why you're the rock author and I'm not. But you're meant to enjoy it. It's not meant to be Sibelius. You're meant to have fun. It's meant to be all-consuming fun, right? And the cover of the Who Sell Out, with Rogers sitting in the bath of baked beans and a big deodorant stick, it looked like they were having fun, and laughing at themselves and enjoying what they were rock gods.
Yes, very much so. And I think a very underrated album. I mean, it's all they've got those little commercials between the tracks, which is fun, but also some terrific songs. Who's Next? I think every time you look at that cover thing, there's that synth thing that introduces Barbara O'Reilly, which is a shame. It is.
But he played that. That's what absolutely floored me. I always assumed it was some sort of loop and, generated
it
by
was,
technical wizardry.
yeah.
He actually played every
Yeah.
day. Pete
Yes.
Townsend played every note on that
Yes,
intro.
yes. It's an extraordinary record, and I think it's the one that really put them in. I mean, they were big. I mean, they played Monterey in 1967, and Keith completely destroyed everything, and then they did, of course, Woodstock famously.
Oh yeah.
I think just as the dawn was coming up, and Abby Hoffman, the political activist, got on stage to make some political speech, and Pete took one over, and then he belted him with the guitar, and that went rather against the odds of the peace and love vibe. But that's the Who. I mean,
they're from Shepherd's Bush. Get the hell off my.
yes,
What was it?
yes,
Was it like? What did he say? Did he say something like
yeah.
"Get off my stage" or something a bit more to the
yes.
point?
Yes. And I think that, yes, it went rather against the sort of, hey man, aren't we having a groovy time vibe? But again, there was that edge to them. There was that real. They were quite threatening. And then what was interesting, I think, was that Pete somehow felt that he had to. He couldn't just be a rock and roll band. They had to do these concepts. Tommy. Live at Leeds gave us a breathing space. Lifehouse became Who's Next, which is fine. But then, of course, in '73 they did Quadrophenia, which is, again, I think it's a nice idea. I don't think it really works as an album or a double album.
Not my favourite. Not up there with my favourites.
I think it was interesting in as much as this came out in 1973, and it's looking back at the mod culture of only 10 years before. It was one of the first albums that really acknowledged rock's own history. So it's an interesting idea, and of course, it begat the film with Sting and Phil Daniels, and I think that's even is there a ballet based on Quadrophenia at the moment, or
probably?
Probably, yeah,
probably so. Have you read, apart from his autobiography, have you read some of his poetry and stuff, Peter?
I try and avoid.
It was. I have to use the word. I'm sorry to use the word pretentious, because I'm sure if he was here, he'd punch me straight in the face, which of course is right. I mean, but I read some of it, and there's a bit. I'm going to use my words carefully, because I'm walking into a minefield here of my own doing. But he's talking about a horse, and the end bit, and I nearly threw up, and I thought I'm not going to say what happens. Leave it to your imaginations. And I thought, really, do you really have to? What are you gaining by this? It's It's revolting. What are you saying? What are we supposed to feel? Are we supposed to feel empathy for this? It's perverted garbage. It was horrible.
I think the problem as rocks. I mean, don't forget, this is the man who wrote "Hope I Die Before I Get Old."
Precisely.
I think you have this thing with pop stars do get old. They're facing their own mortality. They're realizing that they're not 24 anymore, or whatever. And I think also they think perhaps that this pop music that they've been writing they should be doing more mature, more reflective stuff, which leads to poetry, which leads to taking up painting or writing symphonies or whatever. And I mean, in a sense, as you were saying earlier, clip round the ear, Pete, what you're really good at,
it's
3 minute,
3 minute songs.
Yeah.
You're great at 3 minute, fabulous, drop dead brilliant.
Stick to that. Yeah.
But you think about that. You think about Vic Reese, Jim Wire, right? Jim Wire, who did all this anarchic comedy, and then realized, I'm not 20, 30 anymore. I say with Bob Mortimer. I mean, their stuff originally, I thought it was hilarious, right? And you look at Vic Reese now, and now he's become an actor.
Yeah.
He's become a brilliant painter. His birds, his just, and he seems so content. He's married to someone I know quite well called Nancy Sorrell. They're married. He's really happy with his life.
Yes.
So you can move from being. I mean, I don't think there was any, his rebellious comedy of, Vic Reeves' Big Night Out to where he is now. And you can transition and be happy and embrace those things.
Yes. Yeah.
He's still
You
Jim,
can.
but he's an older Jim with different
Yes.
interests. It's
But then, of
okay.
course, if you've grown up, and we forget how young they were, who and all of them, when they began their careers, and you've been doing this for so long, and rock and roll is primarily, well, I was going to say, is a young person's game, except. God loving Bob Dylan's touring. McCartney will be back on the road soon. I'm sure the Stones have been there. Well, in fact, there's a David Hepworth's latest book. It's I hope I get old before I die. I mean, it's they're all at it. They're all. But I think they see, in a way, what they did as pop groups in their youth is almost juvenilia. So it's almost a diary entry from when you're a kid. And they don't really appreciate that this stuff lasts. It's not just nostalgia that makes the opening of Won't Get Fooled Again or I'm a Boy. They're great songs. They're great songs.
You've touched on something so damn important. It's very easy to just label everything. Oh, you're all old farts. You're living in the past, and you're just being nostalgic. Good is good. These are fantastic. Nobody says that. Oh, you like Mozart, you like Brahms, you like Sibelius, you're living in the past. No, because it's brilliant music.
Yes,
it is. Oh, you like you don't like Tracy Emin, but because you're stuck with Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah.
It's no.
Yes.
Great is great. It is timeless. These Who songs. Oh my God.
But of course, then I imagine. I mean, unfortunately, we will never know. But I mean, I imagine they're kind of like millstones around, particularly Pete's neck. That you did all this when you were in your 20s, and whatever you do, and I think this is true of all these legendary acts, heritage acts, call them what you will. What they did in their 20s, the classic stuff, the genius stuff. You're always going to find comparisons with that, and I think with the Beatles. I mean, I know the reviews after the Beatles split, and Paul and John were releasing and George were releasing singles, and they said, well, it's not as good as on the Rigby, or it's not as good as Sgt. Pepper, and they always had, and of course now that was 50 years ago, so whatever they did as children, in a sense, they're still having to live with.
It is difficult. Why? All right, let me ask you the $1 million question, probably quite apt. Why the hell are they going back on tour?
Well, I think this. I don't know, but I would guess that it's what they do. It's what they've been doing for best part of 60 years. It's in their genes. It's in their nature. The roar of the crowd. I mean, there must be something. I mean, you've had more experience of this than I, but I mean, standing in front of an audience who applaud something you've done is a lovely experience. Standing in front of 80,000 people whooping and hollering, I mean, that must be quite exciting, to put it.
It is bizarre.
And that,
but
I
the
think
way you deal with it is, but I think of it as a job. Because the most I've ever stood in front of was 120,000 people for 5 years running at Hyde Park. You get 120,000. It's not free. Everyone's paid for a ticket, and the tickets were expensive. It's 120,000 people there. You go out. It's the most visceral thing. But the only way I could deal with it mentally was, it's a job.
Yes.
Do what I do when I walk on stage, and the moment I walk off, I'm just me again. Yes. I don't need that high. That's how I've run my life, but that's just me, because I think that's how you get into terrible trouble if you need to try and somehow replicate that feeling, which is indescribable.
Yes,
but you've got to stop. You come off, you walk on, and you're the same bloke who's got to go to Tesco's and buy toilet paper. I mean, that's the only way to get through it.
Yes. But if you've been doing it, you did it for 5 years, a couple of times a year. They're doing 100 date tours, and they're doing it. I mean, I think it must be an almost narcotic thing. But also, what else do they do? I mean, look, the kids are all grown up. They're left home. It's in their nature. It's just what they do. It's what they've always done.
It's true. How's Roger's voice now?
Good. I mean, and also these looks. I mean, I don't know what the picture he's got in his attic, but I mean, it must be looking to be looking a bit
No, Roger
knackered.
looks great.
He looks
Roger looks extraordinary. It was funny. I was because I'm so hip. I was watching Antiques Roadshow, and it's like on a Sunday. Welcome to my world. And this guy comes up. I'm not sure when this will be released, but yeah, it was yesterday's edition of Antiques Roadshow. And he's got a huge, big framed board, beautifully framed, with just hundreds of Who tickets. He's been to God knows how many shows and concerts and lanyards and everything. And he had a signed copy of the My Generation album, the first album I ever bought in my life with my own money.
Yes.
The very first album I ever bought, My Generation, and it's signed by Pete Townsend, not everybody else, just by Pete Townsend. And I was looking at that picture there by the oil drums, Union Jack jacket on. It's sort of crane shots, and they're all looking up, and they look so young. And
yes.
Well, Roger still looks great, and Pete not so great.
No, it's fondness for the woolly hat. I don't think does him any favors. It's funny. I know the great thing about Roger, to his eternal credit, and he's only just stood down. His backing of the Teenage Cancer Trust, which he for over a quarter of a century. He really felt that. I mean, I can't remember the exact quote, but he said, these kids who had cancer, and they'd be stuck in wards with babies or old gits like me. There was nothing in between, and he really did a fantastic job. With that, there was a real commitment to it.
I got to tell you, if there's ever a sentence you don't want to have the words in conjunction, it's teenage and cancer. And because I was with what was Variety Club, became Variety, the children's charity. I'm not anymore for a variety of reasons. Because of the way things were run, I didn't agree with it. But I was there for well over 20 years as a trustee, and then their CEO for a while, what they call the chief barker, which is an unpaid job. And you'd go to all the hospitals and give nurses, that sort of thing. And one of the hardest things ever, and I can tell you, because I've known you so long, and the nurse said, or sister said, do you want to come in the ward? Well, yeah, the private me, no. I'd rather hammer a masonry nail into my skull. Of course I don't want to, because it's going to be ghastly. The public me said, yes, of course I'd be delighted. Of course I did. It's the correct thing to do. And there was this lovely girl there. She was, I don't know, 14. We're chit-chatting away, and I come out, and the sister says, well, unfortunately, she's not going to make it. I made my excuses. I got into my car in the car park, and I cried my eyes out.
Yeah.
It was awful. I couldn't stop. I couldn't drive. No, I was in. Anyway, the story has an upbeat. Is that we corresponded, and she did make it. Wow. Thank God for that. This kid did. But I had to hold it together.
Yes.
Because it was a public event.
Yes.
But I got into my car. I was bawling my eyes out. I was oh my God. So Roger Daltrey, bless him for doing that.
Yes, he did a fantastic job. He got some great shows on at the Albert Hall. Yes. He energized the people, and I think that's the positive side of it. I mean, whether they'll tour. I mean, the story was they couldn't get any dates in England because of Brexit, or I mean, you think, well, actually, come on, lads, if the Who are going to, yes, go and play America. Get your millions of dollars from, drain the Yankee dollar, fine. But, the last shows have got to, ideally at a youth club in Shepherd's Bush would be.
Is this
the
last?
A lovely
is this the last hurrah, Patrick? Is this it? Is this the last hurrah? Is that this is it?
Well, I mean that's the rumor. Yeah, I mean they were going to do some American dates, but they said they couldn't they couldn't accommodate any English dates, and I think people felt, well, hang on a minute, I mean, you're the Who. I mean, it's got to.
It's not like you're starting off. You are the Who.
Yeah.
It doesn't get much bigger.
You've got to end up in this country, and I think, I mean, they're all, Pete I think has had knee problems. I think they are They're not immortal. They're not these gods. I mean, they're getting the same afflictions. Well, of course, they're
But we
10 years
don't
old.
want that.
No,
We
no,
want
no,
them
no.
to be immortal. We
Yeah.
don't want the afflictions.
No,
we
no.
want them to be everything that we can't be. That's
Exactly.
the point
Yes.
of
Exactly.
a rock god.
Yes. Yes.
You want them to walk in the room. You don't want to say, "Oh, there's a guy in their late 70s. They look like shit." You want to go, "Look who's walked in," and you want to feel in awe.
Well,
that's the whole point of rock music.
But you'd probably end up talking to Pete Townsend about knee replacements because
you would. You would. You completely.
But it's they've lived their lives in public for so long, and you're absolutely right. When you see them, the Who, at the height of their powers, on a stage with the lighting and the PA booming out, and Pete starts crashing into one of those. It is like Olympus. I mean, it's just incredible.
And also you see Roger doing the sort of lasso,
yeah.
And I loved it. If someone was pissing him off in the audience, he'd just let go, smack him around the head with the mic, bring the mic back, and be right on cue with the next line. I mean, wow, that's
it's
skill.
It's great. Yeah,
they didn't care. What showmen they were.
Yes, and what's good is that there are, I think there's the Who at the Isle of Wight from 1970s on DVD. So it's the complete show. You get the sort of best bits of Tommy plus the sort of greatest hits roundup, and they're at the top of their game. And it's a great show, and it's great to see them in action. And also if they did decide to play the Albert Hall, and Pete's got his health issues, Rogers. I mean, I think Roger said recently he's turning into Tommy. The hearing's not what it was. Everything, is where. But I mean, God, we'd be there. You just love to see him one last time.
But would you?
Yes.
Would you?
Yes.
I have a real problem with myself.
Yeah.
I want my acts preserved in aspic.
Yeah.
Because looking at them getting older is holding a mirror up to myself and going, Jesus Christ, hello, Dad. It's that.
Yes.
I was looking at pictures of Springsteen recently. And I thought, geez, here's a guy I've seen. I don't know how many times I've seen him. Got every album, got it all.
Yeah.
And it's like, put the politics to one side. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. And it's like, ooh, Bruce, right.
I don't think is this new hairstyle's doing him any favors. He looks like a sort of Middle European politician at the moment. Not a good look, but the energy is there. I mean, the friends who saw him in Manchester, and you can see it all on YouTube. I mean, he's 76 for God's sake. I mean, he's bouncing around like a teenager.
It is. Well, if you do what you love, if you do for a living what you love, I know it's a hackneyed phrase, you'll never work again. I always got the feeling that Pete Townsend didn't love it and Roger did love it.
Yes,
and Keith obviously loved it. He loved it way too much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And John Entwistle, I have no idea, enigmatic.
He there was a very good biography of John, and it really was. The money went on, sex and drugs. I mean, hookers and drugs. I mean, it was, and
that's how he ended up. That's how he died, wasn't it?
Yeah. In Vegas, I think.
In Vegas, in a hotel room in Vegas.
Yeah,
and I always thought, you know what, Patrick, if I'm going to go, I might as well go in Las Vegas.
Okay. Room service.
With some, flus.
Yes.
Not great for the family, but you're dead, so
Yeah. Rather than the lingering. I see your point. But no, it is. I mean, I think poor old Pete was from my generation. I hope I die before I get old, which is a great thing to write when you're 20. As you're coming,
you never think you're going to get old because you think 30 is going to be old.
Yeah.
You don't think 70, whatever he is. I don't know.
No.
What you're not planning that.
No, well, you're not. Well, fun enough. I was looking through some old poem. I came across when I interviewed my dear and valued friend Paul McCartney, and we were talking, and I said, did you have any idea that this would be your life, your career? And he said, I remember talking to John. He said, we're talking about something, and we'd be 24 when that happened. And the word he chose was, and I remember I was thinking, it's almost unseemly to be 24, because unseemly. And of course, he's still at it. Pete's still at it. Rod's still at it. Neil Young, Rod Stewart, Dylan, Paul Simon. They're all still. And I just think, it's what they do. It's literally what they've grown up with. They get the buzz from the audience. Whether I sense with Paul Simon, for example, when he starts playing the opening chords of Sounds of Silence, he kind of thinks, oh dear, I think he seems to rather resent that, going back that far back into his catalogue. McCartney obviously loves it, Dylan
adores it, clearly adores it.
He really does, yeah.
Well, he doesn't need the money.
He just can't get enough. I mean, when he did those shows in a little club in New York.
Yeah.
And I thought he'll do 40 minutes of the greatest hits. They're like 2.5-hour shows. He just loves
Can you imagine being there? Can you imagine you're in some small club?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Paul McCartney and the band.
Yeah.
Yes.
And playing songs that you recognise, unlike the man behind me. When Paul plays a Beatles song, it's note perfect. The band he's had with him now for 20 odd years.
You know what my lasting memory of Pete Townsend? This is so freaking random, right? I was at Wembley Stadium. I can't remember if we were going to see Queen or I can't remember. It's a big show at Wembley Stadium, not Live Aid or anything. And I look along my row, and there's Pete Townsend. And I'm like, oh my God. Thinking to myself, Pete Townsend is just like a few seats up. This is great. My hero, right? And he's with his daughter. I'm going back a long time. And it was every father, daughter, parent, child row that we've all had. And she was very upset about something. And he was just being her dad. And he wasn't having any of it. She wasn't having it. And who knows what it was. Could have been about ice cream. It's irrelevant. Yeah. And I thought, you can be probably one of the most famous rock stars on the planet.
Yes.
And you still have to put up with this crap.
Yes, that's right.
You have kids.
That's
it
right.
just made me inside. I didn't show it.
Yeah.
Zen-like, but inside, it was years ago, and I never forgot it.
One way, perhaps, of dealing with that is then by going out and playing to 70,000 people who think you're a divinity. I mean, that sort of corrects the balance a bit,
But Charlie Watts always said that. The wonderful Charlie, well, I thought he was wonderful anyway, Charlie Watts, and he hated touring.
Yeah.
And then he'd go home, the tour would end, and after 2 weeks, his wife would say, please, go out and tour again. You're driving me mad.
Yeah.
You're driving him. He didn't know what to do.
No, that's it. Yeah, that's it. You must get so psyched up for those 2 hours on stage. And then you've got that adulation and that love coming across the footlight. Coming down from that must be real. I think I read somewhere that Bono, when U2 at the top of the game, his wife insisted he decompressed in a hotel for a week before he came home, because he was still the rock god, So somebody.
The bins go out on Thursday. Paul. Take the bins out now.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yes.
Okay, Mrs. Hewson, I will.
Yes. Now, I think I'll go back on tour again, actually. I've got people to do that for me.
And the downstairs toilet's still blocked.
Yeah.
Oh, I just remembered I've got to go and tour at the stage at the Sphere in Vegas. So love to help you with the downstairs toilet. Gotta go, darling.
Well, there's a couple of handymen I know. It is very difficult, and I think we keep coming back to this that when they began, all of them, a Beatle, a Stone, a Who, they were kids, and they thought we'd get maybe a couple of years out of this. I mean, it'll save. There's no more national service, so that's great. But before we get a proper job, we'll have a few years and have a laugh out of it. Yeah. And of course, then it carries on, and then of course, pop music suddenly began to be taken seriously. I mean, in the 70s, long articles written, and I think this refers back earlier to what we were saying about Tommy, that Pete perhaps felt he needed to up his game. He needed to write something that could be taken quote unquote seriously, which was Tommy. And then he got that thing of the rock opera around his neck. So okay, we'll do Lifehouse, which, as I said, to this day nobody understands and never actually played it. And there's been various versions they tried to do, but then Quadrophenia, and I think that's what he felt was a way of growing up. That's his way of growing up in public, perhaps.
But I remember sitting in the Albert Hall and they're going to perform, Tommy. I think I've got this right. Yeah, I have. And he said, but before we do it, we'll just get warmed up, sort of thing. Not with the overture from Tommy, which I think is a bit pretentious. I don't like overtures anyway, because I think it spoils the surprise. However, that's just me. It's just me. I know everybody else loves them. And they ran through some of the big hits, and they kicked off with Can't Explain. And so you know you're going to have this whopping great, God knows how long, extravaganza, pretentious Tommy thing. But they kick off with and I thought, yes. Do you know what? For me, the opening bits, that was the best part of the evening. Way better than anything else.
Then you can go on to Substitutes or I'm a Boy, to Pinball Wizard, you know? And I think along with well, the Kinks and the Beatles. I mean, the Who are up there in terms of great. I mean, just for the '60s alone, you know, I think the great pop singles they came out with in the '60s alone would guarantee them immortality. Then they went on to that you know, throughout the '70s and you know, are still going. I mean, I did by the last album. I can't remember which one it was called. Red and Yellow cover. It was actually very good. I mean, you don't play it in preference to Who's Next. We thought, well, you know, there's something going on there.
The one thing is, and I guess it's the mark of genius. It's a word I don't throw around a lot, very rarely, very sparingly, is that those tracks haven't aged at all.
No.
They really haven't aged. You hear the opening bars to some of those big tunes, and they sound as fresh, as immediate, as impactful as when you and I first heard them as kids.
Yes.
It's an extraordinary thing, isn't it?
And they were, you know, kids when they made them. You know, there was that. You look at the early footage of them all. It's almost they can't believe their luck. You know, they're getting paid to do this. You know,
so I go through life.
Yeah, they're fueled by this enthusiasm, this energy, and it's almost like I was just saying, you know, that early biography, Pretender in a War, and in a way, I think they did feel that in a sense. We've probably got a couple of good years about this. Let's make the most of it while we can.
Yeah, let's have some fun.
And have some fun. And by the way, you know, let's write a couple of classic.
So one last question, because I, you know, I'm always crazy about drummers, that they've fired Zach for the second time, having reconciled with him. Is that right?
Yes, I understand that is the case. Yes, which is a bit. I think firing a Beatles son, I think is a bit uppity. But
they made me laugh though. And then we should end. I know you and I can just yak forever, but it made me laugh. They said, I think the quote was, well, he was overplaying. And I'm thinking, your drummer was Keith freaking Moon. Shut up. No one made themselves more front and center than Keith Moon.
Absolutely.
Because he was brilliant.
No, and yes, that is an unfair criticism, an unbelievable. The one thing that I think is worth mentioning when it comes to the Who, the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus was meant to be their Magical Mystery tour, filmed in late '68, and it was Stone, Jethro Tull, the Stones, Taj Mahal, the supergroup with John Lennon, Keith Richards, Eric Clapton, and Mitch Mitchell.
Yeah.
The Who came on. It wasn't seen for nearly 30 years because Mick felt that the Who just blew the Stones off stage, you know. And when you see it, I mean, the Who are just going for it on every level. It's about a 10-minute performance, and they just blitzkrieg through it. And the Stones are kind of, you know, and that's what delayed the Rock and Roll Circus. And that, in a way, is a testament to the power of the Who.
I can't think of a better way to end this conversation, frankly. That is the testament. Patrick Humphries, raconteur extraordinaire, writer of sublime brilliance, and my pal for the last decades. Yes. Until the next time that we meet, thank you, Patrick. As always, it's always, I find it fun. I don't know where the time goes. I find it just fascinating.
Thank you, mate. Lovely.
Hope you've all enjoyed it. We'll be back again when Patrick decides who next he is going to put put under the Humphries microscope. Until then, no hurty words.